Morning, everyone, and good to meet you all since we last met. I think that was in December last year. A couple of updates to share with all of you. The new team of assistant DGs and deputy DGs has taken office since 1st of January. Very happy to have them on board, and we've been working very hard over the last few months to get the ball rolling into the new term. And the vision that I shared with you the last time when we met about how can we look at IP not just from its legal and technical angles, but from a much broader perspective as a catalyst for job creation, attracting FDI, driving enterprise growth, supporting economic development, and facilitating social vibrancy, right? These are the broadened areas of work in which we want to do. And this is the work that we want to be able to share with you over the next few months, over the next few years, right, as we settle into our terms. What have we done since then to help to start to bring these aspirations into reality? We have created a new sector called the Innovation and IP Ecosystem Sector that's headed by one of our ADGs, and that will be looking at IP from the enterprise and economic perspective. How do we help countries use IP to move ideas to the market? How do we help countries look at IP from a broader angle so that they can use IP as a tool for growth and development? One of the areas of focus that we'll be looking at, especially, will be on small and medium enterprises. I think many of you, when you deal with IP issues, the headlines tends to revolve around big companies, but actually we find that there's an unmet demand from many of the small and medium enterprises around the world, which is a large part of the economy of many of the developing countries, that they also need to use IP to develop themselves. We also need to support the startups in many of these countries, the increasing aspirations for innovation that my colleague Carsten will talk about. But the point is that innovation and creativity is not just confined to one region. It's confined to, and it's now increasingly broadened throughout the rest of the world. And so in this new phase of our work, we will reach out to SMEs. We also step up our efforts to reach out to individuals. We will be spending time and focus on youth as a special category of stakeholders that we want to talk to. We'll be looking at how can we support inventors and creators. We have initiatives in the pipeline that we hope to share with you over the next few months that would reach out and support these individual groups. And the point is that we want to just go beyond the traditional people involved in the IP ecosystem to start reaching out to new groups of people who are all involved in inventing and creating and who need help to bring their ideas, their inventions to the market. The big news from today's figures that we will share with you very shortly is that innovation remains resilient, with filings not dropping like the way they did during the 2008 financial crisis. Why is this so? We have a sense that perhaps the pandemic has acted as a disruptor in some areas and maybe as an accelerator in some areas. I have to caveat that the figures that we're going to share with you are figures from activities that started before the pandemic hit us. This is 2019 figures. But as the filing activities happened in 2020, the impact of the pandemic could have been that they've decided not to file, but that's not been the case. So I think the trend is that innovation remains resilient. And the sense is that the world needs more innovation, as I shared with you the last time we met during a crisis. And necessity, as they say, is often the mother of invention, and I think this translates to more resilient IP filings than some have expected. The other big message I want to share with you is that the overall decade-long trends are also unaffected. And what are these trends? It's that innovation continues to spread throughout the world, with Asia now driving these trends. And I think last year we saw Asia crossing over the 50% threshold of IP filings. In other words, more than half of all IP filings before WIPO comes from Asia. But beyond Asia, right, we're also seeing trends of pickup in IP filings in other parts of the world. I think my colleague Carsten will share with you some filings from Saudi Arabia, from Chile, and these are examples of regions right outside of the Northeast Asia region where you're beginning to see a pickup in IP filings, and therefore we think a sense that innovative activities are growing in these areas as well. So with that, I will pass the floor over to Carsten, my colleague, to share with you some of the more detailed numbers, facts and figures, and I look forward to engaging with you at the course of this session. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Director General. Good morning, everyone. So I'd like to elaborate a little bit on the results of WIPO's international filing systems. Let me start with patents, which, as you know, protect technological inventions. International patent filings under WIPO's Patent Cooperation Treaty grew by 4% in 2020 to reach close to 276,000 applications. Now, what does that mean? 4% growth is in line with the growth trend over the past decade, and in fact it's even somewhat above that trend. As the Director General mentioned, in light of the pandemic and its economic fallout, this is somewhat surprising, and by comparison, during the last crisis, the global financial crisis, we saw a drop in PCT filings by 4.8%. That was in 2009, and since then we have only had positive growth. Now, looking at individual countries, we do see that the crisis did prompt declines in international filings from certain countries, notably Japan, which declined by 4.1%, Germany, which declined by 3.7%. But these declines were offset by strong growth elsewhere. Notably, the United States grew by 3%. The United States is the second largest origin. And China grew by 16.1%. China is the largest origin under the PCT. And as the Director General mentioned, we also saw growth from certain other countries. Saudi Arabia, for example, registered growth, almost doubling its PCT filings to close to 1,000 filings. You see that in different parts of the world. Malaysia registered growth of 26.2%. Chile registered growth of 17%. Singapore close to 15%, Brazil 8%. So the picture has really been mixed, but it is certainly the case that some countries have seen an increase in their participation in the international patent system. Now, do these figures indicate that everything is fine in the world of innovation? I think, as the Director General pointed out, I would say they are encouraging, but they are an incomplete part of a broader story. So it is, of course, the case that most of the patents that are filed under the PCT system that were filed in 2020 relate to innovations that took place earlier, that took place before the onset of the pandemic. Nonetheless, the fact that there wasn't a sharp cutback in international patenting suggests that companies continued to invest in the commercialization of their technologies during the pandemic. I would also say that the continued growth of PCT applications attests to the ability of the international patent system to function during the pandemic. This wasn't entirely obvious at the outset of the pandemic, while of course digitization had already reached an advanced stage before the pandemic. The filing of patent applications still relies on human input and human interactions that were disrupted due to the containment measures. Many offices around the world, including WIPO, had to adapt their procedures and their processes, but in the end, the system coped quite well. Looking at patenting across fields of technology, we see particularly fast growth in audiovisual technology. In fact, the technology we are using right now. In audiovisual technology, the number of published patent applications grew by close to 30%. Big Asian technology companies, Huawei, Sony, BOE, LG, Samsung, are some of the most dynamic innovators in this field. It was also interesting for us to see ByteDance, the owner of TikTok, appear for the first time in the top 50 list of PCT users. Other IT-related technology fields, computer technology and digital communications, also saw rapid growth in 2020. And that is an extension of a past trend, and so did pharmaceuticals and biotechnology. Yet again, it's important to point out that these patterns relate to pre-pandemic innovation, so this is not a story of how the crisis has affected the direction of innovation. And I hope we can begin to tell that story next year. Let me turn to the Madrid system for the protection of trademarks. As you know, trademarks is the form of intellectual property that protects product brands, company brands. Around 64,000 international trademarks were filed under WIPO's Madrid system in 2020. And that represents a decline of 0.6% over 2019. So we do observe a relatively small decline under the Madrid system. And in fact, it is the first decline since the global financial crisis of 2009. This stronger response of trademark filings to the economic crisis is not surprising. Historically, trademark filings have always varied stronger with the business cycle, as the introduction of new products and the creation of new companies slows during times of economic downturn. Looking at the goods and services classes in which international trademarks are filed, the most specified class in international applications is class 9. It's the class that relates to computer hardware, computer software, electronics products, and that is quite consistent with the fast growth in IT-related technologies that we observe in the case of international patent filings. One interesting nugget is that among the top 10 classes, there are two classes, class 10 and class 5, that cover surgical instruments, medical instruments, pharmaceuticals, other medical products, and they were the classes that actually saw the fastest growth in 2020. And since in the case of trademarks, the delay between creation of a brand and when it shows up in the international trademark system is much faster, I don't think it's leaning out of the window to say that the pandemic has played some role here. So we do see more products related to personal protective equipment, for example, entering the marketplace, and that we see reflected in international trademark filings. Final note about the Hague system to protect designs, industrial designs. As you know, industrial designs relate to the ornamental and aesthetic features of products. Applications under the Hague system, which is still a much smaller system compared to the PCT system and the Madrid system, declined by 1.7% in 2020. And the number of applications was 5,792. In the case of industrial design applications, we also like to look at the number of designs in total that are covered by these applications, and there we actually saw a sharper decline of 15% to 18,580 designs. And this is in fact the first decline in the use of the Hague system since 2006. The Hague system kept growing even during the global financial crisis, and now for the first time it has seen a decline. Like trademark applications, design applications are more exposed to the business cycle, and we clearly see that the pandemic has left the mark on the use of the international design system. So these would be the general observations I would have about the results. Very happy to answer any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. You'll also see there's a part in the press release on our arbitration mediation activities, and we're happy to take questions on that. Opening to questions, I have Satoko. Please go ahead.
Talks about questions on GD. When you look at the top 5 countries, China, US, South Korea is up, and while Japan, Germany are down. Could you tell me the reason why the application for in both countries? And then also if you could tell which sector was the biggest drop in both Japan and Germany. And also you mentioned that pharmaceuticals and biotechnology show big growth in the chemistry. Could you give me, if we have, could you give me the share of the patent application which are related to COVID-19 tools, including diagnostic and vaccines? And then also in the opening remarks, BG, you mentioned that about the trend, saying that innovation remains resilient and then the world needs more innovation. But as you know, the India and South Africa at the WTO has put a proposal on TRIPS waiver. And I'm wondering what is your view on this, given the fact that we have the international pharmaceutical industry saying that each time patent is taken away, it's chilling effect on the innovation. Thank you.
Carsten, you want to answer the statistics and then after that I'll take the IP and health question.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'm afraid I can't immediately answer some of the very specific questions that you ask. For example, the technology breakdown in some of these countries. I don't have these figures in front of me, but if maybe you could get in touch with us, we are very happy to put together these statistics for you. As to why we see growth in the case of the Republic of Korea, the United States and China, and we saw declines in Japan and Germany, I ultimately also don't have a good answer for that. Maybe except in the case of China. As you know, the Chinese economy has performed in relative terms, that's important, better than the rest of the world. So in that sense, I would almost compare us to the car industry, where also the car industry has seen much stronger demand from China compared to other countries around the world. So to some extent, I think the differential economic growth path in light of the pandemic is an explanation, but it's not a complete explanation. And what other factors there are to explain, for example, why Germany and Japan indeed saw declines in the number of filings, I don't have an answer for that.
Thanks, Satoko. Thanks for your question on this IP and health issue. As I shared with everyone the last time we met, this is a very complex issue because it involves not just IP but also supply chain logistics. It involves manufacturing. It involves distribution. It involves storage. And so this is an issue which it's not just something which WIPO on its own can have a perspective. It's something in which we need to work closely with the World Trade Organization and with the World Health Organization and with other relevant UN agencies to try to address. So I'm very pleased that today we have, for the first time, an African and female DG of WTO, DG Ngozi, who's taking office. And I look forward to working very closely with her as well as with DG Tedros at the World Health Organization to find holistic solutions to complicated matters. That said, what WIPO has done is that we've been working very much to support member states who need help and advice from us to find the right kind of legislative framework on the right kind of advice on how to find the relevant balance that they need to have within their own different countries to address these issues. We also continue to provide information and support to any other UN agency that needs our help. We continue to have a trilateral agreement with the World Trade Organization, the World Health Organization, to address IP and health issues. We have joined the board of the Medicine Patents Pool. Since we last spoke, that's been a new development. The Medicine Patents Pool, as you may or may not know, is a not-for-profit entity that was started under the auspices of the World Health Organization. And I think Samar can give additional details. But we've joined the governing board of the Medicine Patents Pool as an observer, with no voting rights, but it's essentially the same status as the World Health Organization, to bring our expertise and our support, right, to the work that they need to do. And what they do is interesting. They negotiate IP licenses with countries that need help, and I think this is the way in which we can support. So I think it's a complicated issue, but we're here to support and help.
Thank you. Nina from AFP.
Yes, hi. Thank you for taking my question. I guess it's maybe following up on the previous. It seems like China has really dramatically increased its lead as the world leading patent filer, which position it took only last year. So I heard that you said that it has to do with, I guess, the stronger position that China may have been in this past year. But how much of it do you think is due to that? And do you think this sort of pulling ahead is going to continue going forward? Also, I was also wondering if you might know, for comparison issues, how many patent filings China had in year 2000 to sort of compare how big the leap has been. And then on digital and computer technology, which seems to have been grown quite dramatically. I'm sorry, I wasn't able to follow the entire press conference. You may have covered this already, but could you say if this is closely linked to the pandemic and the lockdowns, and or if there's no connection? Thank you.
Carsten, you want to take this, and I'll answer some aspects of it as well.
Okay. So I leave the difficult part to you. Well, thank you for that question. I think to maybe reply to your last question, which is a bit easier, is we try to make clear at least the patent filings that we present today. We can't relate them to the impact of the pandemic. Usually the delay between when patents are filed in the national office and the time they arrive at WIPO is 12 months. So for most of the inventions that reached WIPO in 2020, these would be inventions that took place before the onset of the pandemic. So I think we can't really say anything about the pandemic on the basis of the patent filings. Somewhat different in the case of trademark filings, where I pointed out that the delay is much shorter, and looking at the classes that that essentially cover medical products, personal protective equipment, there actually seems to be an increase in trademark filings. Now, in the case of China, it's of course very difficult, to predict how filings will evolve from one year to the next year. Maybe looking at this historically, it's certainly the trend that over the last decade, and even going back further into history, the growth rate in international patent applications from China has been very high, has been higher compared to other countries, and that sort of explains why China is now the largest origin under the PCT. I think the one observation I would make about China is that the base of patent applicants in China is really broadening. Some 8 or 9 years ago, it was maybe 1 or 2 companies that dominated international patent filings. I think now we have around 12 or 13 Chinese companies that are in the top 50 PCT applicant list. These are, for the most part, multinational companies that invest a lot in research and development, that have multinational operations, that of course have strong interest in seeing their patents protected around the world. And the Chinese economy is of course large, and the use of the patent system in relative terms is still a bit young, so that there is this dynamism in China. I think that is something that has to do with the state of the Chinese economy and the Chinese innovation system as it is. But at least from our viewpoint, because every year we look at, who are sort of the top entities in the PCT, and, we see a growing base of Chinese applicants that I think, very much reflects the growth of the Chinese innovation economy.
Nina, thanks for your question. I think I've got 3 points to share with you that you might find interesting. I think first, when you look at the Chinese growth in patents, it mirrors a larger trend, right? Where patent applications from Northeast Asia has really mushroomed in the last 10 years. So it's not just China, but it's Republic of Korea. It's Japan, of course. Japan was the first, and then followed by China, Republic of Korea. So it's a trend that's not just within China, but it's a trend within that part of Asia. So that's first. Second thing, though, I want to say is that, as I said at the beginning of this press conference, there is a story that if you zoom out, we look at it from a 10, 15, 20-year perspective, right? That innovation and patents, trademarks, and design filings as a marker of innovative activities, or as a marker of creative activities, because trademarks and designs are very much connected to aesthetics and brands and all of that. But it's a larger bellwether of economic innovative activities, has become a lot more globalized. So you find a lot more trademark, patent, and design filings coming from other parts of the world. It's not as if that filings from the traditional parts of the world, US and Europe, have decreased. It's just that the rate of change, the acceleration, has become a lot more stronger in Asia. And when I talk about Asia, I'm talking about Southeast Asia as well. I'm talking about the Middle East, I'm talking about South Asia. So in all these regions, right, over a 10, 15-year trend, right, you've seen a tremendous increase in innovative activity. And that's why, it's our belief at WIPO that innovation is global, and innovation, it's become a worldwide phenomena. Carsten shared statistics from Saudi Arabia, Malaysia, Singapore, Brazil, and Chile, and that's across the globe. See, so I think to me the big story is that innovation has become a lot more globalized because more and more countries are looking at innovation, right, as a way of driving economic growth. More and more economies are looking at innovation as a tool for growth and development. And then the third thing I'm just going to share with you is that it's about how WIPO can help this and support these trends. We are really here to help innovation and creativity from anywhere in the world. That's why we want to focus on the SMEs. That's why we want to reach out to the inventors and the creators. And that's why over the next few weeks and months, right, you hear initiatives that we're rolling out that will push us in that direction. It's not new work for WIPO, but we're giving it extra fillip, right, to the creation of a new sector called IP and Innovation Ecosystems by naming this year's World IP Day, which is on 26th of April. The theme would be SMEs from ideas to market. So these are some of the things in which I want to just add to the beyond the stats, right? There is a large trend that's going on here. It's exciting, and I think it's something which gives all of us a lot of meaning and purpose to what we do, right? Which is support now innovation, right, anywhere in the world.
Thank you, Director General. The Director General needs to leave at 11:45. I see I have Peter and John Zaragoza. So if there are questions to address to the Director General, we can stay for a few minutes later with Carsten. So Peter, is your question to the Director General?
Yes, thank you. Thanks for taking my question. And
Please.
I'm interested in innovation.
Thanks, Peter. If you look at South Africa, they are the best performer in the entire continent on the Global Innovation Index. Carsten, I think they're number 34 or number 35 on the Global Innovation Index. We can give you the figures of that, but they're the best performer of innovation in the Global Innovation Index that measures a whole series of different metrics connected to innovation. So I do think that South Africa is putting a lot of resources, a lot of attention, a lot of energy into innovation. It's strengths across the board, and that's what I would say generally about Africa. And I'll share with you 3 things about Africa that we're very excited about. And I'll start with the youths. As you know, Africa, and again, I'll get Samar to give the actual figures, but I believe that 65% of the African population, right, is 65% is below the age of 30. And so one of the big areas of pushing in, right, is how can we help youths who are future innovators and creators to understand IP and feel connected to IP. And that's why we need to move away from talking about IP purely from a legal and technical angle. Doing that is not wrong, but it's not enough. We now need to work hard to connect IP to the young people, because if they're going to be our future innovators and creators, they need to feel supported in that journey. And then let me give you an example of a couple of African innovators and entrepreneurs that we have supported. One of them, and I will ask again someone to share the story, is this Kenyan entrepreneur who created a shoe company called ENDA, E-N-D-A. She was a former UN official, by the way, but she left that job to become a shoe designer in Kenya. And she's done some amazing work in Kenya. Her shoes have created jobs for Kenya, fellow Kenyans. Her shoes are now being exported to the region and beyond the region. You check out the designs, right? They're really exciting. And this is the kind of people we want to support. Can we support the future ENDA? So one is to reach out to the youth, and that means reaching out more strongly to the universities and into that demographic, right, that we think will be really pushing the forefront of innovation in Africa in the years to come. The second part is that Africa is very much an SME-driven economy. In many parts of Africa, the SMEs are easily 90 to 99% of the economy. And if they're not using IP to support their own growth and to scale, then there's really a wasted opportunity there. So that's why we are focusing on how can we support African SMEs. Let me give you an example of one SME that has been again from Kenya. I'll try and find other examples, but it's this remittance company called M-Pesa. M-Pesa is looked at the ecosystem in Africa, that there was a lot of people who are unbanked. And rather than try to solve it by creating more bank branches, they said, why don't we look at the mobile phone penetration rates, which are very high in Africa, and create apps or digital technologies, right, that allow Kenyan entrepreneurs to connect with their buyers and sellers and their financiers through these apps. And that's become very successful. It's now being used in many other African countries, being exported to other parts of the world as well. So again, how can we help SME like M-Pesa grow and scale throughout the world? How can we help them understand the IP is there to support their aspirations? And so that's the second part of it. The third part of it is that I think from the beginning of this year, and I'll ask Samar to help provide the actual details, but I think at the beginning of this year or last year, the African continent, right, came together and created the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. And as part of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, right, they created the African Continental Free Trade Area, which again is a way to support the growth of entrepreneurship, enterprises, trade, and so on and so forth, right, intra-African growth. And we are also trying to work with these platforms, right, to support not just certain countries in Africa, but the whole continent itself. So I would say that it's a really exciting region. In the past, WIPO has helped to create technology and innovation support centers in a lot of the African universities. More and more of the African universities are part of projects like WIPO Research that attempts to link researchers and users in areas like neglected tropical diseases, tuberculosis, malaria. I just launched a workshop we had earlier this morning that brought all the researchers together from LDCs and developing countries. And beyond Africa, we want to also support Asian developing countries, those in Latin and Central America, right? So a lot of the work that we're going to do in WIPO would be to take the expertise that we have, right, and now connect the expertise to the man in the street, the inventors, the creators, the SMEs, the enterprises, and in different ways, right? So I think that's really exciting, and that's what we hope to do over the next few months, next few years.
Thank you. Do you have time for one more question?
What's the time now? I've got to go already. Yeah.
You have to go.
Maybe just answer we just let that the next. What's
Yes,
the next? Yeah.
John, go ahead,
Yeah.
please.
Yes, can you hear me somehow?
Yes.
Hi, John. Yeah.
Good. Good morning, Mr. Tang. I was wondering if you could, from a non-specialist, walk us through if a waiver was approved in the WTO, either on patents for vaccines or trade secrets, how that would facilitate ramping up production around the world in countries that have the capacity but don't have the rights right now.
Well,
What
John.
would be the benefits of doing this?
Well, John, it's a question, that's it's a bit hard for it's a bit hard for me to answer, because that's really for the WTO members to answer for each individual country. So I think it's a bit difficult for me to answer this question. But I have to say this: WIPO is here to support, as I said, individual member states who need our advice and help to put in place whatever frameworks they need to put in place in order to find the right balance between IP and health and other concerns they have, other needs they need to address. But we can't talk about these things except in a very contextual, specialized area, because each country has got their own needs, their own capacities in different areas. So I think that's something which I would say is best left to each country to figure out. But we're here to support in any way we can.
Great. I see one last question. Can you take that?
I've got to go off.
You gotta go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We can stay with
Carsten. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Well, thank you, everyone. I wish you all the best. It's a bit late. The Lunar New Year just finished. It's 15 days on Friday. But it's significant as the year of the ox, and the ox, it's an animal that is resilient, that is strong, that is diligent, that is patient, and I think these qualities are the qualities that will take us through this year. I wish you all the best, and I look forward to engaging with all of you. I look forward to sharing with you all the exciting things that we're going to do over the next few months, next few years. And thank you once again for being part of this morning's session. I'll leave you in the good hands of Samar and Carsten. And once again, I look forward to engaging with all of you. And all the best for the year of the ox. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Daren.
Yeah.
Thank you. Nick, New York Times, Carsten is here. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Thanks for taking the question. I just wanted to see if you would agree that it's logical to expect patent filings might go down in the coming year as a result of the impact of the COVID innovation in 2020, given the time lag in filings. And the second question is simply on the issue of AI. A couple of years ago, if I remember right, WIPO said that Chinese companies made up, I think it was around 17 of the top 20 filers in AI. Are we seeing that trend continue, or are we seeing greater diversity in that market? Thank you.
Thank you, Nick, for these questions. I'm afraid the last one I can't answer, and we would need to go back to the data to look at this. One slightly challenging thing about artificial intelligence inventions is that they're not categorized as such in the standard patent classification, and it is a bit more difficult to identify AI-related inventions. It also depends on the definition of AI, but we can certainly look into what we can do there. On your first question about what to expect this year, in light of the fact that the pandemic and its economic fallout probably has affected innovation activity in one way or another. And you're absolutely right. I would expect essentially the innovative activity of 2020 to be reflected in patent filings in 2021. At the same time, I'm not entirely sure what to expect, for a number of reasons. One is that, we already know that, different sectors and also different technology sectors were affected differently by the crisis. So if you look especially at, a lot of the IT companies, and you just have to look at their stock market valuations, although they're arguably also driven by low interest rates. But some of the companies have actually done really, really well, and as far as we know, have seen revenue growth, and they have also invested more in research and development. We also saw, of course, a lot of R&D investments in pharmaceuticals, biotechnology, of course, linked to the COVID vaccines. But it's not clear whether, to what extent that necessarily has come at the expense of other medical innovation. And I would expect that sector also, to have done quite well. I think another important aspect is that, of course, there is the question of how many innovations are in the pipeline, but also, and that's why I pointed out that the 2020 results was actually quite encouraging. The willingness and also the ability of companies to continue to put money into commercializing technology. What we saw in the crisis of 2009 was that a lot of companies just didn't have the funds to support patent filings anymore as their revenue collapsed, and at least that we didn't see in 2020. And if touch wood, we would see an economic recovery this year, I would also be quite optimistic that we don't see it this year. So I think I fully agree on the premise of your question, that I think a lot of what took place in 2020 will determine the patent filing behavior in 2021. But I think there are lots of effects going in different directions, so I'm not quite sure what to expect.